around it. And they started making towers. These are just some general pictures of construction. They dug a hole in the ground. This is Tower 85. This is one of our neighbors' towers. Ours is 77, 78, 79, and 80. We had a little rain that fall. As you can see, we didn't know if he was having an indoor swimming pool. All the topsoil is over here behind me. This is all the clay that came out of here. They filled these up with cement, buried this piece of, this is rebar, buried that in the concrete, and the turbine sets on top of that. And this is just kind of what the township looked like. I'd be the first to admit that for 6 months, nobody bothered to wash their car in Dawson Township. I mean, it was a mess. There was dirt on the roads. There was dirt on the grass. There was limestone on the roads. It was a mess. But if you drive through this area today and see how close this is our cornfield right here. This is our neighbor. Our property line is where that mowing line is. If you drive through the township today, drive through the county today, and if you'd like to do that, you're more than welcome to contact me. My information is, you call the McLean County Extension Office in Bloomington. I'll be glad to take you out there, and we will drive up this road to Tower 77, and you can stand right there underneath the turbine. You can't do that any other way unless you are with somebody from Horizon or you're with somebody who owns the property, because they're all private. It's all private property. Every now and then I hear somebody say, oh, we just walked right up to one of those turbines the other day and that was really cool. And I said, you didn't see the little sign on the post that said private property violators will be electrocuted? No, we didn't say that sign. Well, that's the case. So, but anyway, I'd be more than happy. I've taken probably 1,000 people up there. I was telling Tyler, I've had people from 44 different foreign countries come out and visit our wind farm. They're just amazed with what this process is. Laid new culverts. This is the road that's going back into one of our neighbors' fields. So it was a mess. I'll be first to admit it. But, get back here a minute. But the process was, this is what we wound up with. We wound up with turbines that are 263 feet high, or 236 feet high. The blades are 135 feet long. This was taken about 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's cold that day. Everything you see above ground is an oversized load. Everything is an oversized load. All this equipment came from various places. The blades came from Australia, of all places. The tower segments were made in Louisiana. The generators came from Denmark. I'm going to remember, Tyler. Have you ever heard of Flickr.com? You know, photo sharing place. I just happened to stumble onto that one day, and I thought, gee, this is pretty cool. I'll just open an account and post some of my turbine pictures, and some of my pictures from my trip to Yellowstone in Colorado, where I used to work. And so I put in a turbine picture. If we run across it, I'll show you. It was really cool. So I get this, a response back from somebody, comment on the car. That's a great picture. Are they Vesta generators? So I responded to his comment. I said, yeah, they're Vesta generators. He said, were they made in Denmark? And I said, yes, they were made in Denmark. And he says, I live in Denmark. And he said, we have wind farms out in the middle of the North Sea. You Yankees are decades behind us Danes. So now this guy, we email each other back and forth about once every 2 weeks or so, and he's asking me for new pictures all the time. But they sit out in the middle of the North Sea, and I would love to go see them. And I imagine, see how they plant those things in the ground and how they, they must go out in boats to service and everything. There are 54 full-time employees that work for Horizon Wind Energy, who is now the people who own this electricity. Horizon Wind Energy out of Houston, Texas. Horizon was a time when we were involved in it, owned by Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs has since sold it to a company in Portugal whose name I can't pronounce. The checks come from Horizon. That's all I care about. We call Horizon in Texas. This is Horizon's largest wind farm east of the Mississippi River. Horizon has a large wind farm in Texas that's larger than this one. This one is 240 turbines. If you looked on that map that I had at the beginning of the program, you saw all those turbines were south of Illinois Route 9, which is the east-west highway through the county. It goes right through Bloomington Normal. They're all south of there. But planning, what they're doing right now is signing contracts for 240 turbines on the north side of Route 9. So essentially it will mirror the turbines that are to the south. And then as we look at that map, in the lower left-hand corner where that turbine was, there's going to put in 80 more. So before this is all done, there'll be 540 turbines out there, which will be the largest wind farm probably maybe east of the state of Kansas. So they're doubling the size of that farm, and it's taken a while. I mean, even with 5 years between contract signing and construction, it's going to take a while to get the landowners taken care of. Yes, sir.
How are the turbines distance-wise from each other?
Each turbine has, good question. That's better than one of the sixth graders' questions. Each turbine, let me answer it this way. As you look at this turbine, up here at the top, that's a navigation light right there. That's a radiator to cool off the oil generating. Okay, the oil is an oil-cooled generator, 1.65 megawatts. 1.65 megawatts, which is enough electricity to light 120,000 houses. Okay? We get paid based on the size of the generator. And that was a big issue with the zoning board and the county board. How are we going to tax these things? They are leased from us. We have complete access to all the roads. We have complete access to get back there. We haul our corn crop in and out. We drive our tractors and everything else, or the guy that cash rents our farm uses them as we want. We can't go up to the turbines themselves because there's a donut of space around there that belongs to them. Okay, but that navigation light up there, when they first started those, every one of those navigation lights would come on, and every one of them would shut off at the same time. It's not blinking, it goes on and off, and on and off. On a second, off a second. Well, I had the opportunity to fly into Bloomington Normal International Airport one night during this process, and I knew what was going to happen, but the people on the left side of the airplane didn't know. And all of a sudden, all these red lights come on and down in McLean County, and then they're gone, and people say, what was that? And then I'd say, well, that's our wind farm out there, Twin Groves Wind Farm. Oh, it's amazing. They'd all turn on, they'd all turn off. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be neat if they could have put those towers out there so they would light up and say, shop at Sears, go Illini, not in McLean County, but, actually each turbine is in a specific location based on a number of factors. First of all, we are sitting on, the reason I've got to back this question up. There's 4 things you have to have in order to have a wind farm. Successful have a wind farm. And I've had people call me and say, we live in such and such a county, can we have a wind farm there? I said, you need to talk to people that are in charge of it, but I'll tell you what the 4 things are you need to have. First of all, you have to have a consistent source of wind. And you think it's windy out here today. I was out at the wind farm Tuesday, and it was 4 degrees with a group of kids from the FFA chapters, and they were freezing to death, and so was I. The wind comes, basically 60% of the wind flow comes from the southwest in McLean County. Hits the Bloomington Moraine, which is if you go to Leroy, and drive north out of Leroy, you'll go up the front of the moraine. Now, this is not like a moraine out in Colorado where I used to live and work, where the moraines are 1,000 feet high. This one is maybe a couple hundred feet. But the wind comes across, hits that moraine, and as it goes up, it increases in speed, and the first thing it runs across after it flies past all the hawks at Marine View State Park is the Twin Groves Wind Farm. Consistent source of wind. That was all glaciated 25,000 years ago. You have to have cooperative landowners. You have to have good infrastructure, because everything that I said, everything that you see from there up is an oversized load, and it came from the northwest side of Normal where the Mitsubishi plant is. And you have to have a way to get the electricity onto the market. It doesn't do any good to be sitting out here generating electricity, 165,000 megawatts, 1.65 megawatts times 240 if you don't have any place to send it. Well, just east of the Twin Groves Wind Farm on that map, the last turbine number 1, is about 200 yards from the Commonwealth Edison transmission line that goes through eastern McLean County. It's Horizon Wind Energy up to that transmission line. From that transmission line, it's Constellation Energy, and it goes up to Chicago on ComEd's line, and it's sold. There's a market for electrons, just like there's a market for corn. I didn't know that. You never know what you're going to learn. That electricity is sold everywhere from Saskatchewan to Florida. I have a son that lives in Washington, D.C. You know how Washington, D.C. is in July, August? It's hotter than blue blazes. And we'll call Matt, and he'll say, oh, man, it's hot. Got your air conditioner running? Got 2 grandkids, so they're going to have to, I want them nice and comfortable. Yeah, well, you could be burning electrons that came from your granddad's farm. Because that electricity is sold wherever it's needed on the web, on the grid at that time. So where do they sit? They have to be 1,025 feet away from each other. Because, would you stand up, sir? I had a young man do this the other day, but he's not here, so I'm gonna have you do this, okay? This is a wind turbine, okay? The wind is blowing this direction. Your arms are going this way, okay? Not that fast, but that's good enough, okay? I'm a wind turbine behind him, okay? Wind is going this way, okay? If I'm closer than 1,025 feet to him, the turbulence from his blades will damage the turbine blades on my blades, and the warranty expires. So they have to be 1,025 feet apart. Okay? Took a few minutes for the kids to figure that out. Thank you very much. Took a few minutes for them to figure out. They have to be 1,025 feet apart. They also have to be so far away from buildings, so far away from towns, so far away from roads, so far away from houses, so far away, a distance away from power lines. One of the reasons why we couldn't have an access road off of a road that is very close to all these four turbines and it had to go basically through the length of our farm was because Corn Belt Energy had a power line going down the road and they weren't about to move the poles to let Horizon widen the road so they could get into the road access road that way. There were roads in our township that were posted no construction traffic. A pickup truck never even drove down those roads. A Horizon pickup truck never rode down those roads. There was a time in McLean County, they started in August, turned these on in March. In June, they started the next 120, turned them on the following spring. There was times when you could go anywhere in McLean County, anywhere in Dawson Township, if you had a white pickup truck and a hard hat. You could go anywhere, except on the roads that said no construction traffic. And those people had no problem. They were never bothered by any of the dust, the gravel trucks, the concrete trucks, the construction people, whatever. So yeah, they're all in a specific spot. They also had to be very careful about where they were located in regard to Indian artifacts. At one time, 22,000 Kickapoo Indians lived on this property, lived on this ground, until the Black Hawk Indians wiped them out and the remainder of the survivors went down to Texas. You can see here they're building towers, okay? It's a two-step operation. People say, how long does it take to build a wind turbine? If you had one, it would probably not take as long as if you had 240 or 120, because it takes one crane to put these units together. Okay, there is the crane right there. These are the blades laying on the ground. But then they have to have another crane come in, and it puts together the tapered spot right here. This is the tapered part. Sets in the cell on top and hangs the blades. And I'll show you that process in a minute. Okay, this is looking through our cornfield. There's all the pieces for a wind turbine. This is the hub that the blades go on. This is the generator, the air cooling, the oil cooling part of it. And these are the turbine sections themselves.
Made out of what?
They're made out of it's a steel, a metal kind of composite that, very fortunately, is very strong. It'll stand a 200 mile an hour inline wind. For some reason, it is also impervious to ice and spray paint. So there was over several $100 million worth of equipment laying out in McLean, laying out in the field in the county there for a long time. One of the benefits was that the wind turbine company hired a private security firm, and they patrol all that and still do patrol it. So we have very little. This is not the high crime part of the world anyway, but it's a zero crime part of the world now, because not only are the police departments out there like they always are, but so is the security agency that Horizon Wind Energy has hired. So there's constantly people out there. And also, every one of these turbines is inspected every day. This is a young person's job, ladies and gentlemen, to climb up in that turbine 263 feet and check it out, and then climb down and drive and go to the next one and do the same thing, okay? And I'll show you in a minute what they climb up in. It's not for the claustrophobic nor the weak in the legs, okay? But it's just been a very interesting experience for us. This is a crane back here that's putting these tower sections together. For a long time, it looked like McLean County was growing smokestacks instead of corn stalks. But this is what the blades look like when they're all put together. Lighting they worked 24/7. And there's a lot of this cannot be done when a high wind situation. But think about that for a minute. They're building a wind farm in a place where there's a consistent source of wind, but you cannot have high wind to do a lot of the work. So what the boon to this was, the negative part was, and this is something that the people in McLean County were griping about, none of the electricity stays in McLean County. None of it stays in McLean County. Ameren IP is our big supplier. Who's your supplier here? Ameren? Yeah. They're tied in with the coal people. They're not interested in wind farms. They're tied in with the coal companies. That's fine. I have people that live in Gillette, Wyoming, friends of ours that live there, and they make good pay by mining coal that Ameren burns. This is Corn Belt Energy's, Corn Belt Electric's neighborhood. They don't have the transmitting power, the transforming power to break 1.65 megawatts of electricity down to what we would need for your house. I have one of our former employees went from us to the Corn Belt, and we talked to her all the time, and she said, the guy called and said, can I get some of the electricity from this wind farm? And she said, you mean like lay a drop cord from the tower to your house? And he said, yeah. No, we can't do that. It would be very disastrous. So, none of the electricity stays here. However, there's a crew of people with Horizon that's all they do. They travel from place to place to place to build these wind farms. All of the steel workers, the carpenters, the electricians, the operating engineers, all those people were hired from the labor pool surrounding McLean County. There were a lot of people who made a lot of money working on the wind farm around McLean County. The operating engineers are typically, from what I understand, operating engineers, guys who run road graders and cranes and those kind of things, they are probably the highest paid scale on a construction project. They were paying every other trade what they ordinarily pay operating engineers. The operating engineers were getting a boost higher than that. So it was a good thing for the economy of our county as far as construction and labor is concerned. They had a vast pool. We had people coming from Peoria. I know somebody that came from Kewanee every day to work on the wind farm. That's a long ways from Bloomington Normal. The downside of it is that you don't do some of these jobs in high wind. So when it comes to the place of putting this together, puts this last section on, the nacelle on top of that, and hangs the blades, you can't do that on a windy day. So supposing it's February 4th. What is today, 5th? And the wind lays tonight about midnight, 1 o'clock. You get a telephone call from your supervisor. The wind speeds is 5 miles an hour. We're putting turbine 77, 78, 79, 80 together. Be there in an hour. So at 2 a.m. in the morning, you're working. Okay, so that's the downside if you're on the labor side. It was really strange to go out in our fields on Thanksgiving night and have the field lit up like an airport runway as they were putting turbines together because it happened to be it was cold, it happened to be a cool night, less wind, and Thanksgiving night they put 2 of our turbines together. They put this section on the nacelle and hang the blades. So it was, there's good and bad with everything. Okay? This crane right here, I think I've got some more pictures of it. Maybe not in this pile, but another pile. This crane is putting together the top section, the nacelle, and putting the blades on. When this crane moves from field to field, it takes a great number of pickup trucks, something like 10 or 15 trucks or semis to carry the pieces of this crane. It has to be put together by another crane. Okay, it's so big. The tread width would be as wide as this room is long. Okay.
We had one just like that at the Memorial Stadium.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
I watched how they worked. Put it up one crane, taking down the other.
Yeah, it takes one to put it together. Because of its weight, they couldn't take it on roads or cross roads because it was, we've got ditches and all that kind of stuff. So they would put them in sections where they knew they were going to be, and if they had to change them, they could take it apart and put it someplace else. Moving this across the frozen field in February was an unbelievable sight. I watched it and I figured out that he was going maybe a quarter to a half a mile an hour. and he was riding on huge beams. And these forklifts, not like the forklift that you see in a little warehouse someplace, but these were industrial strength forklifts, big, like four-wheel drive tractor type forklifts, were picking up the beams from behind it, running around and laying it in the front, going around and picking them up and laying around. It was like Gulliver's Travels, when the Lilliputians are tying down Gulliver and trying to move him. It would be that kind of like that, as this crane crept across the ground. This point here is almost 400 feet off the ground, so he wants to be real careful. This is an access door. None of these turbines are working, and you can tell why. First of all, they're all pointing in different directions, and the wind is pretty consistent, but it's not scattered like that. But you can tell they're not working by the way the blades are. You know how a turboprop airplane, when it starts, there's not too many turboprops floating around anymore, but the blades will be like parallel with the ground, and then as they start, the pilot feathers them, and they actually rotate so they bite the wind. That's what these blades do. They rotate inside that hub where they're connected to the hub, and right now they're in the stabilized position. When they start, they'll start to turn, and then they'll rotate so that they're biting into the wind. How they know to do that, I have not a clue. Somebody up here on the north end of campus designed the computer program that probably figures out how to do that. But it's amazing that they do. When they start, I've been out there with kids, and we'll be standing there talking, and the blades will be turning over our head, and pretty soon they'll stop. And then you'll note, somebody's gone inside and they're checking it out. Sometimes they stop them because there's not enough demand. It all depends. It's just like a fire hose. You can't take a fire hose and put it into a lawn sprinkler because there's not enough room. If there's not enough demand for electricity, sometimes they shut them off. They're all on circuits. It's like your house is on a circuit, several different circuits. These are all on several different circuits. They'll shut them off to do maintenance. They'll shut them off to do maintenance on the collecting point. I've been out there with people and they've noticed not one of them is turning anywhere. And I've been out there on real calm days when they'll be sitting there, and then you'll notice them turning so real slow, and then the blades will start turning as the wind picks up. And that's pretty impressive. That's kind of a fun time to be there. And then you realize that the wind's blowing. Here's one. This is a lot farther away from that crib than it appears because they use a telephoto lens on it. This is the McLean County crib, and here's a little ag note. You can always know exactly in McLean County, most of Illinois, if you get lost and you see a corn crib, you know exactly which way north and south is. Because 99% of the corn cribs in McLean County and the state of Illinois are oriented north and south. This is north up here. This door faces straight south because the wind comes this direction, now the southwest in most of the state, and that provides the most optimum ventilation for when we stored ear corn in those cribs. Okay, that question will be on the quiz. Okay, this is a lot farther away from this microwave tower than it appears.
Question.
Yes.
The turbines, do they interfere with as you say, this close to that tower? Does it interfere with any TV, radio, or make any noise that?
It's a lot farther away from that tower than it appears. And my brothers-in-law live out there, and they say they haven't had any interference with it. They just got a television antenna.
They have no complaints about
it? No. And as far as noise is concerned, I wish everybody could come out and stand underneath one and tell me what you think. Noise is a relative thing. Some people can stand a lot, and some people can't stand any. My personal opinion is that it's kind of like it becomes a white noise after a while that you hear this whoosh, 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 and you eventually stop hearing it. You just don't hear it at all. Okay. The other thing people ask is about birds. I love birds, and I jokingly tell people we don't have to worry about a Christmas goose for 30 years. But that's because we're going to probably have to go to the grocery store and buy one or hunt one because we have a lot of resident geese in McLean County because we don't do any fall plowing anymore. There's always a food supply because none of our combines are absolutely perfectly picking up everything. They're always leaving something on the ground. We have a lot of blacktop parking lots, and even in the freezing coldest night, a blacktop parking lot will maintain some heat. And of course, if you build a new house in McLean County, you've got to have a pond. Have to have a pond. Mostly for water retention and for controlling floodwaters and overflows, but also for aesthetics. And those ponds are fed a lot by sump pumps, so that water never freezes over. So there's always water, there's always food, and there's always warmth. It's all the things that its habitat is for. So we have a lot of resident geese. Well, what they decided to do was they would pay us. These are all the parts, components of a turbine laying there. This goes inside, then all the pieces stack on top of it, and this is the one that goes on top of everything. One of the lay-down yard where they store everything. These are the lines that take it across to the collection station that puts it onto the grid. And the people whose farms these went across were also leasing an easement, but theirs is a one-time payment. Ours is an annual payment. One of the things that they decided that they would take 24 turbines. They took one of ours, and they paid us $1,000. And after the crop was out of the field, they stripped the ground off down to bare soil, made 5 spokes from a 5-spoked wheel, 10 foot wide, 50 feet long. So a 50 by 50 foot piece of ground has been stripped off. And we're probably not going to plant anything on those next year. If we do, they'll come and grade them off for us. They've already paid for that. And then they hired a gentleman from town, from Ellsworth, to go out and walk those strips on those fields and see how many birds and bats die in collisions with the turbine blades. The Audubon Society signed off on this, said it was no problem. We're not in a major flyway. So, research has shown, so far we've found none. Research has shown that out of 10,000 birds that die by the hand of man or because of non-natural causes, 5,000 of those will die flying into the side of a glass wall building. I used to be the principal of a school that had a breezeway, a 1-story breezeway that was maybe from here to where Tyler's standing, and about 3 times a year a bird would fly into the glass wall of that breezeway. It was a 1-story breezeway. And I'm thinking, why didn't you fly 6 feet higher? Instead of bam into a glass. So that happens. 2 of them are hit. I have a turbine accident. 2 of 10,000 will fly into a turbine or be damaged by a turbine. That research comes basically from California. When early wind farms were not towers like this, they were what we call, what you and I would know as a windmill tower. A framework with a generator on top of it. Now, a hawk's eyesight is 700 times better than ours. Red-tailed hawk followed me I came down 57 and turned on to 72. A red-tailed hawk flew along beside my truck all the way from that exit ramp up there, and he went down and he got his breakfast or his lunch over there in the grass. Anyway, a red-tailed hawk's eyesight is 700 times better than ours. So they're sitting out there and they see some rodent out there in the ground, and they take off from all these perching places and they get hit by a turbine blade, and that's where that research comes from. We have yet to find any birds or bats around the turbines in our study area. We were paid for that. So that's one of the things that we found. Now I'm going to show you some pictures that are really cool. These are not quite. I did this program in November at the planetarium at Parkland Community College. An old science teacher doing a program like this in Parkland Community College in a planetarium. Man, it was in hog heaven, so to speak. These pictures were spread across the ceiling up there. It was phenomenal. After the program was over, a gentleman came up to me and said, my son was a subcontractor on that farm. On that project. He has some pictures you might want. I'll email them to you. He sent me 79 photographs. Look at this. This is the construction project. Okay, we're starting on the construction phase here. Starting to dig the holes. Okay, they're pumping in the hydraulic cement. This is what it looks like underneath the base of the turbine. There's a 40 by 40 by 40 foot block of concrete far enough underground that if the project ever goes south, they'll take down the turbine tower, take down the tower, take out this part of the ground right here, and we'll cover the rest with topsoil. We'll farm the rest. We'll farm over it, just like we do farm around it right now. Okay, these bolts that you see standing up here are the bolts that I showed you in an earlier photograph. They're just kind of laying there side by themselves. These are torque bolts that they set. The tower will be set on top of these, and they'll be tightened inside and out. I had a gentleman who was an engineer from Spain who was on the farm a couple of weeks ago, and this was October, a couple months ago. And he really looked it over closely because he's a fabricating engineer. He said, I can't believe how well this is put together. This is unbelievably constructed. And I said, I would hope so, because I sure don't want anything to happen. I've seen the guys come out and they'll take a wrench and put it on top of those bolts, and wham, there's a great big hammer to make sure they're nice and tight as they torque them up all the way around the turbine, inside and out. I'm real happy to see them do that. I'd love to see them do that because I don't want any problems with this falling over my cornfield. That's bad press. Here they're getting ready to pour cement. And there's the finished product. This guy took photographs that I couldn't possibly take because they told us when we're in your farm doing this kind of stuff, we would appreciate if you'd stay away. And we knew when they were there because a lot of times they would tell us what's going on. You know, we're going to be in here, or they'd set a pickup truck across the access road, and they would know we couldn't go in there. Mostly this was done after our cropping was done, so we didn't have a problem with it. These were some that were a little on a different time scale. There's a turbine part. That's the top of the tower. Pretty long trailer. There's the inside, what they look like. These were manufactured by GE in Louisiana. This is what it looks like inside. This is not a job for the claustrophobic, those who fear heights, or those who have weak legs. This is where'd my thing go here? There we go. This is the cabling that goes up and down the tower, runs all the electronics and all the electricity. Electricity came down, buried underground. Everything is buried underground. Now, our farm is over 100 years old, and we are in McLean County, which was, in 1850, thousands of acres were given to the state of Illinois in what we call the Swampland Act. You hear that word, swampland? Okay. McLean County got 27,000 of those acres. And then we had to drain them in order to get the benefits of the soil. Thanks to people in Chatsworth, Illinois, where they did field tile, we were able to drain the soil to get that point. Okay. So this is what you would look like going up inside the tower. That's the door from the inside. There you go. This is the pictures putting the crane together, the big 400-footer. Takes one to put one together. Kids couldn't figure out, well, if this crane is putting this one together, who put this one together? So that one came in on a truck. Counterweights, they're in the process. We're working inside because this is the tower that's there, and this is the section they're going to put on top of this one. Okay. You can see why you don't do this on a windy day. These guys here would like it to be absolutely dead still, I'm sure. There's a generator. It's not overly wide, but it's very heavy. I passed one on 74 today. I don't know where they were going, but it was just like this one. This is the side the blades are going to go on. A little higher. You don't want to do this in a hurry. What's amazing to me is that they're going to put this on top of this. They're going to put blades over here that weigh, I don't know how much weight. They're 135 feet long. There's 3 of them. You know, they carry 2 on a truck on probably 10 or 12 axles. And this thing is going to turn around on top of this pole to face the wind, whichever way the wind goes. It's going to turn whichever way the wind goes. Now, before the process of this taking place, we visited the wind farm up on I-39. There's 67 turbines in the original farm. They're not as tall as these and not as long bladed. And there's 7 families own those 67 turbines. They own the ground they sit on. So we were visiting with the guy and one of the landowners, and he said, would you do it again if you had the chance? He said, in a heartbeat. He said, our county was a mess. He said, I saw cement trucks from states I didn't even know had cement plants in them. They brought to haul the cement so fast because in places where they weren't pouring it, where they were pouring the big blocks of 40 by 40 by 40, they just backed this dump truck up, threw the cement in the ground, and went to get another load. They weren't worrying about smoothing it out or anything because they were in a hurry to get it going. But you stop and think that he said at night, sometimes they can hear the turbine turning on the post. They'll have a little kind of a creaking as it turns into the wind as the wind shifts at night. So it's amazing. I mean, it's engineering at pretty much the top of its scale. Okay, there's the generators all set. Wonder what his health insurance policy is. Wonder if his wife knows he does that. There's the blades, 2 of them, nose to tail.
The blades are made of what?
The blades are a composite material, like, you know what Bert Rutan's airplane is? It's that kind of stuff. To cut down as much weight as possible. The guys combine right around them. They're stacked up. You got some hay bales there to keep them from falling over. All the bolts that go onto them. This is inside the hub. You actually climb in there and they bolt them on. And this whole thing, remember, this whole thing right here will rotate 90 degrees. It'll feather 90 degrees. It'll do this. Okay, just like your arm has those 2 bones in it that allow you to do that with your wrist, that happens here. And this to me is the really neat part. They're getting ready to load them up. Okay, this is the really cool part. How do you pick that thing up and put it on the front of that turbine when it's 135 foot long? One of those legs is 135 feet long. Well, what happens is, this is that big 400 and some odd foot crane that will pick up the middle part. But down here, this crane has the tip of the blade and its grasp, and it's picking it up first so that as it's picked up here, that doesn't drag across the ground. Talking about 2 guys that have to be friends with each other and coordinating, and the supervisor. Can you imagine the guy that's the foreman of this job? Because I've seen what it's like when they have to repair the tips of one of these blades. I'll tell you that story in a minute. Tyler, remind me to tell him about blade tip repair. Okay? Loading this up, carrying it up. See, he's still got it under this crane, he'll have it under his control so that it's not dragging the tip across the ground. Is that a cool picture? Hey. A subcontractor that was there took these pictures. I couldn't even get close enough. I don't own a telephoto lens big enough close enough to get these shots. And your reaction is pretty much what those 6th graders were yesterday. They were just like, and they're from Leroy. They know what this is all about because they're 12 miles away from it. Bolted on from the outside. This is why you do this on a still day. This is not a job to be done on a breezy day like today. Pretty cool. Kansas City Power and Light had a couple turbines that the guy who was also working on that job. And I get a little creative here. Sunset pictures. So let me show you what it looks like now. Well, not today, right now in the freezing cold, but let's see. We'll go to this one here. They're loading, they're building it again. I want to show you a picture. They're creeping this crane across the ground. This little door right here. When you're in a high-rise building and there's a sign on the elevator that says, in case of fire, use the Stairs. Thank you. In a turbine, in case of fire, use the elevator. This is the elevator. Right there. You go up in that turbine, and there's a fire up there. Again, I told you they inspect them all the time. They inspect them every day. It's a young person's job. You go up inside the turbine, if there's a fire in there, I mean, there's a lot of equipment in a small space. That space is less than the size, it's maybe the size of this room from me to Tyler, okay? And something goes wrong. You open that door, and you look down 263 feet, okay, to the solid McLean County soil, frozen harder than 2 and 3 feet deep now. But next to you is a steel cable. And it's bolted to the frame, and then you throw the cable down there, and it comes down, and it dangles to within about 3 or 4 feet of the ground. And then you take a grappling handle, and you you sit on the edge of the thing. If there's a fire going behind you, this is not going to take as long as I'm saying. There's motivation, and there's motivation. And then you rappel down that cable to the ground. Okay? And every now and then you'll be out there when they're working on them, you'll see those cables dangling in the breeze behind the tower whenever they're working on them. The wind farm up in Pawpaw, when they opened up that farm and they put out applications for maintainers, they had over 500 people apply. And they said, okay, you 500 people, here's the first thing you're going to do. Crawl up to the tower, rappel down the rope. The 50 people that were left after that statement was made were hired, And basically, judging from the group that I dealt with yesterday, they were all sixth graders. Because they thought it was a wonderful, that'd be a lot of fun. Right. Be my guest. Okay. So that's how that works. But the blades are not turning because of the way they're rotated. Tyler, what was I supposed to tell him? Pardon me? Tips. Oh yeah. This is a friend of mine from the Children's Discovery Museum. We do a lot of programs with them, and she wanted to see what the tower is like during the construction. A couple months ago, August, I guess it was, one of the turbines got a tip damaged. I've never seen one struck by lightning. I mean, they're turning, so it would be a little hard for a bolt lightning to hit them. But they had to do some repair work on one of the tips of the blades. So the blades were set so that the damaged tip was pointing straight down, and they had cables tied to the tips of the other ones, and they were reaching out, looked like huge tent lines. And the guys who were working on it, and of course there was cables holding that one down. The guys who were working on it were hanging from a basket from the hub down 135 feet to the tip of the blade that had to be rebuilt. Okay? Now there's a fun job. And they were probably, if you take 263 minus 135, how many feet, 100 feet they were above the ground, and swing this little basket, and they were hanging on a rope from up there. These guys are interesting people. But we're glad they're there. This is a photograph I sent to the guy in Denmark. I wanted to make sure that he realized the McLean County skies are really that blue. Yeah. Thanks to Photoshop, we can do that. That's Colorado blue sky. And these are some pictures I've taken, various seasons of the year with the turbines in the background. And contrary to popular belief, the day that they did turn them on, all the livestock in McLean County did not orient themselves north and south. As these Angus cattle will show you. Okay. The pros that we can see as a landowner, we got a consistent payment, paid quarterly. That's the money part of it. I look at it that we're also doing something to help our environment. We tell people the 20/20 rule. Right now, 20% of the electricity that we use is generated from a nuclear power plant. In 20 years, 20% of the electricity will be generated from wind farms. Okay, that to me is a positive thing. You know where Bloomington Normal is, you know where Carlock is. I have a friend who has a dairy farm just outside of Bloomington on his way on Normal on the way to Carlock. In fact, he lives on a road called Zebarth Road. And I once asked Steve, how come your road has a name when the next road north is 1900? He said Zebarth Road is within the 25-year expansion plan of the town of Normal. So when they laid out the roads, they gave those roads that are in that section names. He's within the town of Normal's 25-year expansion plan. He's also in the area where another wind farm has been proposed, but has been tied up in court so long that it's, they haven't even started leveling the ground. And his farm, if something goes wrong at Clinton, if something goes critical at Clinton, he cannot sell his milk because he's too close. But yet he can, if this other wind farm ever gets their act together and wants to do things, he can have two or three turbines on his property. Not going to affect his dairy cows at all. So that's kind of the way I look at this as a real positive thing. Negatively, it was a mess. Our township was a mess for 6 months of the construction period. We found 4 tile that we didn't know we had before. Grandpa put those in. He didn't map them out. We had no idea where they were. Now we know where 4 of them were because they cut 4 of the tiles there bearing the cables. They gave us photographs. This is the tile that came from tower such and such in section such and such. It was a chalkboard. Lloyd, farm, date. And then there was another chalkboard in there with the repair done and the date. Okay, no charge to us. They told us where they were. They showed us, we got photographic evidence of what the damage was and what the damage repair was. They took care of all that. Now, I mentioned about Horizon. I'm kind of addressing you for this because I know this is probably a question you might want to ask. How did this work out with Horizon, and why is Horizon's generators, turbines working now, and the other company's turbines, they haven't even laid out a road yet. They haven't cut through any cornfields yet. When Horizon came to town in 2001, they spent a lot of time and effort. They visited every township office. They visited every fire protection district. They visited every school district. They visited every road commissioner personally. They visited every landowner. Bill Whitlock was the project manager on this farm, on this project. You'd go into his office and he would have a map of the town, of the 3 townships, would fill up that wall. Every house marked, an aerial photograph. Bill knew every landowner in McLean, those 3 townships. Amazingly enough, 70% of the people in McLean County are absentee landowners. They live in Florida or Texas or whatever. A lot of them have 4x4 on the side of their pickup truck. That means 44 months in Texas, 6 weeks and 44 weeks in Texas, 6 weeks in the fall and 6 weeks in the spring in McLean County. That's fine. Our pickup truck has 4x4 on the back of it. They aren't here. They decided, I don't want any part of this. The United States of America, we have the rights of private ownership of property. You can do whatever you want to do with your property as long as it's not illegal. And they elected not to have it. So there's big chunks of the area that don't have any turbine property on it at all. None of them. Which is fine with me because that allows me to have 4. They might have only given me 3 or 2. We have relatives, because everybody knows everybody else in those townships. We have relatives who farm right next to us. They would not even allow them to buy an easement to bury a cable across the corner of their field. I don't want any part of it. Don't want any part of it. That's fine. The rights of private ownership of property. You can do with it what you want as long as it's not illegal. But Horizon did their homework. They visited all the schools. They visited all the school boards. They visited all the coffee shops. They visited everybody. And they told them exactly up front what was going to happen. We can guarantee you that for 6 months during the construction phase, your township's going to be a mess. When you're done, we will put it back better than it was. And they have. We have blacktop roads now that we didn't have before. They were blacktopped. Maybe they were oiled. Now they're blacktop. We have curbs and gutters in the country. Curbs and gutters on country roads. I've lived in McLean County all my life, except when I worked on Colorado. I've never seen a curb and gutter out in 2850 East and 3600 North, We have complete access to all the roads that are on our ground. We can use them for whatever we want. There's a donut of space around the base of the turbine that they do not want us to be on. Unfortunately, we forgot where that circle was, and our corn planter went right down beside it. We didn't get any trouble. That's fine. They're very easy to work with. When we call Horizon in Texas, A human being answers the phone. And I tell them who my name is. Well, Mr. Lloyd, how are y'all doing today? This girl's from Houston. How are y'all doing today? What can we do for you? You know, and they're very friendly. They're very easy to work with. If there's a problem on the, getting the check sent to the right address, no problems, taken care of. As I said, there's 54 people who work full time. That was the county board's command. If you're going to do this, we have to have X number of people working here. How they got the number 54, I have no idea. But what they did was I think they purchased a farmhouse just north of the town of Ellsworth, remodeled it turned it more into an office type space. And that's where they headquarter all their maintenance trucks, and they have all their computers in there. And it's really cool to go in there because they've got these big flat screen monitors, and you can look at a turbine, and they can punch up turbine number 77. They can tell you how much electricity it's generating right then. They've got a map. I mean, it's there's several of them together. It looks like the combat control station on a destroyer. And they have all the information that you need, and they're more than happy to talk to you, more than happy to visit with you, more than happy to show you, more than happy to have them buy my photographs to put on the wall, of their wind farm. So yeah, there were some negative things, but as far as my opinion is concerned, I haven't had a negative problem with them personally. That's not to say there haven't been people that are, but I haven't heard of any of those that have. So, yes, sir.
Can you tell me what percentage of this 1.65 you're getting megawatts? I mean, it's like a number each year, 35%, 40%.
Me personally, I don't have any idea. No. They figure that about in 10 years that the farm will pay for itself, and the tax rate is based because they pay property taxes on the roads and on the turbine sites themselves. The wind farm, the company does. Horizon Wind Energy pays the taxes on that. And that rate is based on the size of the generator. Before this project would disappear, what we would anticipate is that it would go, that they'll come in with a crane and they'll take out this 1.65 megawatt generator and put in a 2.5 or whatever, And then that will increase both the tax rate that they pay to the school system and everybody else that's based on your taxes. I say school system because that's the biggest chunk out of your property taxes. And that'll also increase our payments from $5,000 to something else greater than that. Okay? What we don't get any electricity from this whatsoever. None whatsoever. Gentleman in the back, you had a question?
How do you calculate the tax rate?
Pardon me?
Who calculates the tax rate? How do you determine what the tax rate is?
County board. Yep. And it's basically on the same thing how they tax us. Okay? You had a question, ma'am?
I do, building on the questions about the tax rate. What so far has been the economic benefits of both McLean County and the school districts in specific because of this project?
This school system that this turbine is sitting in, most of the turbines sit in 2 rural school districts. This turbine happens to be the 4 of ours sit in what was called Tri-Valley school system. Where Downs is on I-74? That's the southern end of it. Ellsworth is the northern end of it. Tri-Valley is Ellsworth Downs. Aerosmith is Blue Ridge. They're the next town over. Saybrook Aerosmith is a school district. There's about 3, but they're all rural school districts. Tri-Valley, for example, has no industry at all. Downs is a bedroom community to Bloomington. It's easier to get the State Farm Corporate South from Downs than it is from my house in east side of Normal. So they have no industry. The biggest industry prior to the wind farm coming there was the you rent it yourself storage place. Okay? The property owners of some houses out there, and there's some really nice homes in Downs, they were carrying the burden of all the taxes body for that district. Now they have a wind farm. What they generate and what they get from the wind farm and what they've done with that school tax money, I'm not sure. I couldn't answer that question. I do know that Tri-Valley has put their heads together, and if you ever drive through Downs, you want to stop by off there sometime. They have a unique school setting because they have a campus. Their high school, middle school, elementary schools, administration building, and bus garage are all right together. I mean, you can walk from one to the other in a minute or two. Next to their football field is another transmission line that goes to, it doesn't go to Chicago, it comes from someplace else, but it goes right past their football field. So what the Tri-Valley school system has done is they have applied for grants, and they are going to build a turbine on their school property. Not as big as these, but a turbine, because you can get them now that will fit on top of your house. And they figure that in 10 years' time, they will have paid for the cost of that turbine and the fact that they won't have to buy any electricity. And any electricity that turbine generates over their needs, they can sell on the grid on the power line that's right next to it.